Good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome everybody to House Education. Today, what we have on the dock is we have one bill that we're going to be hearing first. That's 218. And I see Senator Fenton here from Keene. Welcome. And following that, we're going to go into a brief caucus because we have some bills coming up to exec today. And so we will caucus immediately following the hearing and then come back. I can tell you on 272, the way we're going to operate and function on that, there's going to be one person from each party speaking on behalf of that here at the executive session. And then we're going to go ahead and move into the vote. So with that, I'd like to go and open up this hearing on 218 and welcome Senator Fenton. I haven't seen you in a long time.
Been a while.
Yeah, since what, Thursday?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and ladies and gentlemen of the committee. For the record, I am Senator Donovan Fenton. I represent District 10, which is a lot of towns, so I'm not going to say them all for you guys. I am here today to talk to you about Senate Bill 218, establishing an early educator professional development grant. 218 aims to address the retention of our teachers. As we all know, teachers are an integral part of every child's life, which is why we should enable our state with every tool possible to ensure our children have the best and brightest teaching them in the classroom. This bill establishes an early educator professional grant. This grant aims to increase teacher retention, increase teacher support efforts, and increase the likelihood of success for New Hampshire's educators by incentivizing teachers to stay in this field. This bill is based on another recommendation from the Commission to study our teacher shortage, so this is not necessarily a new idea. We know the first couple of years of a new educator's career are crucial to foster their drive to make teaching a lifelong career. Too often lately, we are seeing teachers enter the field and leave it a year or two later, which is why we need to provide school districts with the resources to support and mentor new teachers. I hope you will join me in supporting 218 and help our teachers find a home in New Hampshire teaching where they feel supported and valued. And with that, I will take any questions.
Thank you very much, Senator. Are there any questions of Senator Fenton? Yes, Representative Luno and then Representative Myler. No, Representative Myler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator, for bringing this before us today. As you know, we've had this teacher shortage work group working on this, and I think your bill basically speaks to a major piece of this as it relates to retention, and I appreciate you bringing this forward to us. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. It's really about teachers who went to the field and we're seeing them leave a year or maybe 2 years later, and this will really help support them in that field and hopefully retain them.
Representative Luno.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, Senator, for bringing this forward. So I do notice that there's a fiscal note on this bill, but it says they were unable to provide as introduced at the time. In your estimate, what would the fiscal cost be of
That's a great question. I think there's people behind me that could probably answer it a little better than me.
Okay, well, just as a follow-up on that, so it does talk about a grant being $500,000, an annual appropriation of $500,000. Yeah. Is that, how does that compare with a bill that's being heard in Senate Education right now in terms of use of state dollars and the impact it could have on families and workforce?
So thank you for the question. I won't compare it to another bill. However, this bill really is one of the main pillars to help our educators and retain them. I think that's what really comes, I know I keep saying that word retain, but that's really what it keeps coming back to, is that we're losing teachers, whether that be to a different industry or another state that pays more. I think when a teacher feels valued in their district or in their school and there's support, and that truly goes a long way in keeping that individual in that school.
I do have one question for you, Senator.
Yes, sir.
Within the bill itself, this is a grant for $500,000. When I looked at the fiscal note and with DOE, they're looking for like a 0.3 full-time equivalent. When I try to do some rough modern mathematics, came out with about $25,000. Is it possible that that 25 grand could come out of the 500,000?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. Absolutely. And also we're talking about point three, if I understand it correctly, point three working, you know, how much work is that individual going to do? There's nothing in here that dictates to hire an individual to run this program or anything like that. Point three is a pretty small number. So I think it's easy enough to maybe spread the job between two people, maybe 0.5 and, you know, 1.5
I agree
and
with you,
1.5.
Senator.
Yeah.
Further questions from the committee? Representative Cascadden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you on behalf of all the teachers, Senator. A couple questions. One is, what is your intent of early educator? Are you talking about preschool, K, and how high up the grades? And my second question is on line 6, whether you would consider changing the word "and" to "or." And that would make, that would provide options. I've found that implementing mentors can be very valuable. So if they could orient, support, or mentor educators, and what is the intent of early educator?
Absolutely. Thank you for the questions. The intent of early is early in their career, not in terms of the age group they're teaching. We're talking about an individual that has been in the, a teacher that's been within the first 3 years of their career in education, line 7.
Okay, thank you.
Because that's who we're really targeting is these new educators who want to feel welcomed, want to feel supported. In terms of your suggestion, I'll leave that up to you fine individuals here in the House Education Committee. I think you all know what you're doing, so leave it to that.
Thank you. Further questions from the committee? Yes, Representative Dry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. I was looking at the comments from the Senate hearing and was talking about virtual mentoring for rural educators and a program from that. Is that still included in this?
I'm not sure if that individual is here who testified on that subject. The way I understood it was that the state outsources a rural educator program to something like Colorado that has a very large fiscal note that we're doing, and this could somewhat take place of that, or maybe spend less money going out of state and actually spending more money locally. If did that answer your question?
Follow up. Yeah, I was just wondering if there was a quote here about maybe spending it locally and wonder if there'd been progress on that issue.
If this bill passes, there'll be progress on that issue.
Any further questions of the senator? Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Have a good day. I'd like to call forward Megan Tuttle. Do you have a cohort coming with you? Could you please introduce?
I will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the House Education Committee. For the record, my name is Megan Tuttle. I'm president for NEA New Hampshire, representing 17,000 educators across the state. With me, I have Irv Richardson, who is our coordinator for public education and school support. And so we're going to testify together if that's okay. As you're aware, as Senator Fenton said, we're facing a crisis in education. This isn't anything new. We have, an educator shortage. The committee that was set up did come out with some ideas, and I believe this was one of them. We do want to say, though, we don't really think we have an educator shortage for the most part. We don't have a shortage of potential educators, but we do have a shortage of educators coming into the profession. So the people are there, but we need to come up with ways to attract them and to retain them. And this can go back as far as high school, getting that pipeline from high school into the profession, into the pre-service programs that we have in colleges, and then also into, keeping them in New Hampshire. So I feel the line of sight. So the talent's out there, but, not having support for this talent is going to be a hindrance to attracting and retaining that talent. Historically, I think we've said this before, and I'm sure you've heard, if educators or teachers are going to leave the profession, they're going to leave within the first 5 years. This bill would allow that mentoring to really help and booster it so that they're not leaving within the first 5. They feel supported, as the professionals that they are. They would help require local professional development master plans to articulate professional learning goals and have that mentoring early educators. This legislation would also provide matching grants to local school districts that use their local funds to help fulfill these sort of plans. This is kind of a multi-pronged effort to attract and retain those teachers. I like to think of it as a three-legged stool. And so when I was teaching and I had open house in the classroom, I would talk to the parents about education really as a three-legged stool, right? It took myself as a teacher, it took the students, and it took the parents to all work together to make sure that education was the best it could be. And so we were all part of that stool. This is part of that. The Senate has acted on two legs of the stool already. So we had Senate Bill 140, which is the student teaching stipend, that went through the Senate Education. And we're working with them still on the possibility of a loan repayment program that is going to be one way to help reduce barriers of people coming into the profession. So this we see as that third leg of the stool. If we can't support the teachers and the educators coming into the profession, we're not going to be able to fill the positions that we still have open across the state. And there's many positions still open across the state. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Irv Richardson, like I said, our coordinator of public education school support. He's going to share some more expertise on the importance of supporting mentoring programs for early educators.
Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Good morning, Chairman Ladd and honorable members of the House Education Committee. My name, as Megan said, is Irv Richardson, and I'm here representing NEA as the Coordinator of Public Education and School Support. I also speak from my experience as a teacher and school principal. I'm here to testify in support of SB 218, which establishes an early educator professional development grant. This bill would require that as part of their district professional development plans, districts would be required to, one, articulate what are the professional learning goals and descriptions of the activities that districts will use to orient, support, and mentor educators who are one or more of the following. And I think this is important. Within the first 3 years of the profession, Megan alluded to the fact that Ingersoll's research shows that people leave within the first, half of all educators leave within the first 5 years. It's also people who are working in a new school or district. So I know people who've had experience teaching in one district, go to another district. They also need support, although it's a different kind of support. And then people within districts are switching roles. Those people would also get support. And I'd like to point out that this bill appropriately uses the word educator. New Hampshire Regulation 50102S defines educators as administrators, educational specialists, instructional specialists, teachers, para-educators, educational interpreters, and school nurses. This means that when passed, this bill would help to ensure that in addition to supporting new teachers, which is incredibly important, districts would also be designing and providing support to new administrators, educational specialists, instructional specialists, para-educators, interpreters, and school nurses. And I know of at least 3 former administrators in the room, and I know when I started, I felt prepared when we graduated from Southern Maine, but I could have used some additional support in those first few years. So this would allow districts to access funds to support the professional development activities in which the district's new educators would be engaged. And I think this is as it should be, because when it comes to working with our students, there are no unimportant jobs. And that educators assuming these roles need and deserve support as they learn their new responsibilities and refine their professional skills. As Megan alluded to, concerns about educator recruitment and retention are not new. Long before the current shortage of educators, research informed us that up to half of all new teachers were leaving the profession in the first 5 years. This turnover costs districts as they have to spend time and resources recruiting new teachers and supporting new teachers. It also costs the students because of new teachers coming in who don't know the routines and don't know the school culture. Research has shown that strong and effective support and mentoring programs have the following benefits. One, it helps in recruiting new educators. Schools and districts with mentoring programs are more likely to attract new educators because these educators know they will be joining an organization that offers them support and encouragement. It advances the professional learning of new educators. By working with an experienced, high-quality mentor in the school or district, new educators increase their professional skills more quickly than by using trial and error in isolation. Experienced educators serving as coaches and mentors can increase new educators' learning. This is particularly important with some of the site-based plans, which people don't go through preparation, but they go on site and have only a mentor to help them develop their skills. It reduces educator attrition. Educators who feel supported, engaged in their school's professional culture, and who are making a positive difference in their students' lives are more likely to stay in the profession. This bill shows the legislators' intentions to support the new educators in New Hampshire. And finally, it increases staff collaboration and reduces isolation. With orientation and mentoring, educators develop social capital and create a sense of collective efficacy and a positive school culture. There's research that shows that student achievement is higher in schools with greater social capital and educator collaboration. Once this bill becomes law, there are organizations in New Hampshire ready to support schools and districts as they work to orient, support, and mentor new educators. The New Hampshire Educator Effectiveness for Student Success, a statewide group collaborating with consultants from the Chief State School Officers and the University of Florida CETA project, is working on developing mentoring resources that will soon be available. Our organization, NEA New Hampshire, provides mentor training to local affiliates that request it at no cost. And our next one is coming up in Haverhill on June 26th, if anyone would like to attend.
Haverhill, New Hampshire.
Yes.
You're sensitive to that.
I am very sensitive to that.
Yeah, I don't think Massachusetts would be good with us going over the border to provide training, although it could happen. So district support for new educators will be partially supported through the funds of this bill. And was brought up earlier, these funds can supplement a district's use of Title II funds. Currently, the New Hampshire Department of Education does contract with a group in Fort Collins, Colorado, for about $469,000 to provide mentoring for rural teachers, and that's great, but it would not, that work does not provide support to the other educators that would be covered with this bill. As President Tuttle indicated in her testimony, this legislation would provide additional support to New Hampshire educators in a time when we are experiencing shortages and a great need for additional highly qualified educators. I urge this committee to find that SB 218 ought to pass. Thank you, and any questions?
Thank you very much. Any questions, Representative Myler?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. Could you review for the committee, what is the content of your mentor training?
There are several different components to the mentor training. The first one really is looking at a way of being and making sure that our goal for the new mentor isn't to create a clone of myself, but to support you in your learning as an individual educator. Then we get into how do we give and accept feedback. So I was taught as an administrator to spend a lot of time, here's how you give feedback. We've learned that it's also important to help the new educator understand how do I receive, accept, and use feedback. Then we get into an instructional conversation. So how can I sit down and help you plan a better lesson? How can I help you reflect upon your lesson? And how can we work together on improving the school culture?
So,
Go ahead.
Yeah. So you also mentioned the issue of the 5-year window. Is it your feeling that many leave the profession because of the isolation in their own classroom without the kind of administrative or peer support?
That's what the research would indicate. I think there are different reasons why people leave, but Dan Lordy talked about, we used to work in individual one-room schoolhouses, and then now it was like an egg crate where we put all the individual eggs, but we really don't interact and support each other as much as we could. So it's not every educator that's leaving because of isolation, but it is a strong factor in why some people leave.
Thank you.
Further questions from the committee? Yes, Representative Dry, and then Representative Lekes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. Is there any priority as to how this would be awarded among school districts?
That, I don't know of a priority. It would be those when they amended their professional development plans to include this, would include what funds would match their Title II funds. So I know of no, we're going to serve this group first.
Okay, follow up.
Representative,
So there's no like financial priorities or rural priorities or anything like that? No grouping, first come, first served?
Yeah, as far as I know, yes.
Thank you.
Representative Lekes?
Can you explain to me better exactly what this money specifically is being used for? Is it to pay the mentors extra, or what is it? I'm not sure I understand.
It could be one of several things. It could be to pay a mentor for a new educator, or it could be that someone needs a class in classroom management, or they need to attend workshops. So we're leaving that up to the local districts to determine, okay, Megan is a new principal or a new teacher or a new paraprofessional. What does she need for support? And then we could use these funds to provide her with that support. If it's a mentor, great. If it's a workshop, great.
Thank you.
Sure.
Representative Heath?
I just have to say thank you. Many years ago, when I was an assistant superintendent, we ran a mentoring program in the SAU 19, and the results were so fabulous. Not only did the collegiality amongst and between teachers, administrators, and parents, but the children benefited completely. Children had higher assessment scores. They did better in classrooms. Everybody was happier. Do you anticipate those kinds of findings if we have this grant? And quite frankly, as a person on Division II in finance, I look forward to working with you on this. So hopefully this passes this body. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, comment. I do anticipate those results coming out of this. When I first started teaching in Keene years ago, I had a mentor as a new teacher. But then when I moved districts and was teaching in Pembroke, I was 10 years into my teaching profession, but I had a mentor more for the culture of the school. And both of those instances made an enormous difference in how I felt as a teacher and just everything you had just mentioned. So I do think those results will come out of this.
Further questions from the committee? Thank you very much. And Irv, what I would do if Megan wanted to get a degree in principalship or administration, send her to Southern Maine.
Charlie Smith, right?
Yeah, that's right. I remember. Thank you. I'd like to invite Sue Hannon.
Good
Welcome.
morning. My name is Sue Hannon. I live in Derry. I am an educator in the Manchester School District, and I am the president of the Manchester Education Association. I wanted to speak about this bill today because I think it's extremely important. If I'm not one of the few, then I'm probably the only person in the state who actually has a job that addresses this. I am not a mentor for the Manchester School District. We don't have any. When I first started teaching in Manchester in 2005, we did have a mentor program. It was fantastic. It helped me feel at home immediately. It helped me to understand the evaluation process. It helped me to know that I had someone who had my back. And if I had any questions about what I was doing, I knew that I had a person that I could ask. Manchester lost that program in the 2011-12 school year when there was a lot of financial devastation going on there. Right now, what I do is I work for the Manchester School District on professional development and credentialing. I work with the new teachers who are coming in. Manchester had over 100 new teachers come in this year. About 50 of them are not credentialed. And that's what I'm working on with them. Plus, I'm working with another at least 70 people who are searching for a different credential. So it's a lot of work and it's a lot of time. Having mentors in the schools and in the school district would be extremely important to be able to help these people understand the myriad of paperwork that you need to go through in order to get a credential if you're not going through the traditional route of college. But it's also really important for the district to be able to address all the competencies that the Department of Education is looking for in an educator and that the district would be looking for in an educator. Our school district in particular is working so hard to do these things, but without mentors, these people are not able to be supported in the way that they need to be. And so I know we will be losing some of these brand new educators who are really excited about coming in and working with students and improving the school district. But because of the lack of mentors, we are not able to completely support them. You know, there are 1,100 school educators in our district. There's a lot that needs to go on. And so from the largest district in the state, it's really important to have a program like this, even if it's one person at the elementary level and one person at the secondary level. It's better than nothing because we have someone we know we can rely on to go out and help people in their day-to-day and not feel like, as Dr. Richardson said, that they're in an egg crate and they can't go talk to each other. When I had a mentor, when I first started in Manchester, I knew I had someone to talk to. And I knew that I had people around me who were in the same boat that I was and coming in at the same time. And we found a lot of camaraderie together. I would like to ask that you approve this bill and support it. It is really, really important to the retention of great educators. You don't know what you have until you're probably 3 or 4 years in, as far as a new educator and what they can do. But if they're going to leave us in those first 3 to 5 years, we will never know what we had and what our children will miss out on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from the committee? Representative Petronell?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. Thank you for coming in. I'm assuming you're on school vacation.
Yes, indeed.
I'm confused about the concept of mentoring. I've always thought of that as something that comes about naturally, an affinity between people, you know, someone who's new looking out, seeking out somebody with greater authority and experience. So I'm curious, it sounds to me like you're creating a position of a mentor, or are you talking about training current educators in how to be mentors?
The answer is yes. So mentoring educators, being able to have some positions in the school district where we have experienced educators who can work with a group. So we have a large group of educators in the room today. If I were going to work with all of them, I would be able to, as the mentor, teach them about what our evaluation system is like. Teach them about those first days of school and what to do or maybe what not to do. I would be able to teach them about the policies and so on of the district. So mentors can take on a few different roles in a school district, because mentoring on the large scale, which is what we're talking about here, would be helping our newer educators, providing workshops for them on maybe a monthly basis to say, okay, it's time to get ready for grades. Here's how you do report cards. Here's how you use your student information system. On a smaller basis, we also have mentors who are working with individuals on their credentialing plans. And that is, if I'm a mentor, I'm an experienced educator, I have a certification of K through 8 elementary ed. So if I'm working with another educator who is getting that certification, I can mentor them, I can work with them on what they're doing in their classroom, have them observe me, I go observe them. We work on their paperwork to get credentialed and make sure they're taking the proper either classes or workshops or whatever it might be to get them to that point of being a credentialed educator. So we have a number of different opportunities for what mentor can be. In this case, we're talking more on the broad perspective of being able to work with many educators at once, going through an orientation process before the school year starts, and being able to provide some support and some leadership that our people, especially those who have never done anything with teaching before, really need to have.
Go ahead.
Thank you. It seems to me teachers would be natural mentors because they're kind of mentoring in the classroom all day long. So am I understanding correctly that it sounds like we would be educating teachers on how to reach outside of their classroom and consider mentoring and teaching their colleagues in order to build a better school for everybody involved?
Correct. So as an experienced educator, I'll give you my last year when I was actually in the classroom. I worked with the educator next door who was new to teaching. She is on an alternative certification plan. She's teaching math and I'm teaching literacy. So completely different. However, I'm in her classroom all the time, or she's coming into mine to see what I do. We work together. We created escape rooms and all kinds of things for all of our students together and using both the math and the literacy. But what I was doing was mentoring her, making sure that she had a good understanding of what's expected in the classroom. And yes, as educators, we do that, but for where I am, I can't really go beyond right there. I didn't have someone teaching a class on the other side of me, or I probably would have helped them too. But this is a bigger perspective. This is either at the school level or at the district level where they're talking about things that the educator needs to know and understand, things like policies and the ethics and conduct policies of the DOE. We're talking a broader perspective of what's expected for writing lesson plans, for creating unit plans, for following the curriculum as it's been adopted. And so understanding those kinds of things, it's a lot for someone coming in, especially who's never been an educator, to have a giant program like Amplify or iReady or something like that plopped in front of them and say, go to it, right? If we don't support them in that, and we can do that as mentors with multiple people. So I, as a mentor, maybe for literacy, can take anyone and everyone K through 8 who is going to be teaching the Amplify program and be able to train them. All my educators right now in Manchester are trained for that. But next year when we get new people, who's going to have time to train them? Because it's a big program and the educators are all like, okay, I have to go do this and pay attention to what I'm doing with my class. It's really hard to be able to make sure the person down the hall is doing the same thing because we're not right next to each other, right? So that's what it's about.
Representative Cascadden?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. So I've written a mentoring program handbook, and I got a little confused with something that you said, so I want to see if we can clarify it. Is it the intent, and you have such a large district, to add a full-time benefited position as a mentor? Or from my experience, is it a stipended position for a teacher who's working in the field? And because mentoring requires time over their required day, that there would be a stipend for them to provide that support and mentoring. So I'm not sure which you're talking about. Thanks.
So I don't know that that's defined necessarily in this bill, but I think it's something that, depending on what happens here and how it goes forward, maybe districts would be able to develop either way. I have been in a district where we had mentors for the whole district, and that was their only job. They went from school to school. We have 21 schools in Manchester, so they were all over the place working with all these new people, making sure that they were being taken care of appropriately. We also, at the time, had mentors in our schools. So each school had its own mentor who could talk about what's going on in the school, right? What's expected in the school. So I think it really depends on the district as far as how that would work. If you have a district that has 3 schools, it's going to be a lot different than Manchester with 21.
Follow up?
It would seem, though, that with the amount of money we're talking about here, that it really applies more to a stipended position than a totally new position that
Yeah.
includes benefits, but just
Right, and again, I think it's, because it's Title II money and.
Title II
and-
tied, yeah.
And all of that, it really depends on the district, because
It's a
of the
lot.
district sizes, they're gonna get a different amount of Title II money, so some schools could use it as, per school, and some school districts can use it as per district.
so they could talk.
Yeah,
Thanks.
because stipending 21 people might be just as much as paying 2. Yeah. Thank you. You're welcome.
Representative Tanner?
Thank you, and thank you for taking my question. I was sitting here trying to remember way back when, as a person coming out of a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, coming into a school district as a wet behind the ear teacher, and the things that you've been saying about the mentoring and about the culture and the program, I think are important, but they don't teach you, and it's kind of like being a parent. There's no textbook that tells you how to parent and how to react to kids, how to discipline kids, how to realize that there are all different types of kids, and how to handle situations when they pop up that you least expect. Even in student teaching, I remember that how difficult it was. We'd go back to the dorm and talk about the little boy that fell in the toilet or something, and how that just was such a big surprise, and how do you deal with it all of a sudden? And at least student teaching, you had a master teacher that was there to help you through it.
Right.
When you go out on your own, you don't. And I'm just wondering if you could kind of talk a little bit about that side of mentoring, about how important it is to have an experienced teacher to get you through those rough spots the first couple of years.
Thank you. I appreciate that question. Having an experienced educator working with someone who's brand new is incredibly important, because, as you said, there's a lot of things that aren't necessarily going to be in a textbook or something that you learn in a college classroom. And so everybody's learning it, even those people who didn't get a degree in teaching. And I think that that's really important to understand. Educators are lifelong learners, and we always do rely on each other for a lot of things. Having an experienced educator, when I came to Manchester, I already had 11 years experience at Merrimack Valley. So coming in, I knew what I was doing for teaching, but I didn't know about Manchester. I didn't know about the culture of the city. I did not know about the culture of the building I was in. Having an experienced educator who knew Manchester, for me, who could say, these are the things that you need to do or not do. Knowing that I could call him at any time and say, this happened, right? Did I do the right thing? To be able to be coached, to say, yes, you did the right thing, but let's talk about it, right? How else could you have? What else could you have done? If this situation presented itself again, how might you react differently? I think it's very important in the process that we see in business of onboarding and bringing people in to work in a place. You get trained. My daughter right now is a traveling nurse in Washington State. She has had, before she even got there last week, she had at least a month's worth of training online. Had a training yesterday, not even in the hospital she's going to be in, and is doing a couple more days of training before she sees a patient. We don't have those kinds of things. We don't even have that kind of time in education. So to be able to have somebody who is specifically trained to make sure that as people are coming in and are starting a school year, are completing first semester, are working on creating assessments, working on how can I add to this curriculum, how can I do something exciting for my students? How can I differentiate my instruction? All of that really needs to have a mentor for these educators who are coming in, because they either don't know enough about teaching or they don't know anything about teaching, and are quite often stuck with, well, what do I do right now because I don't know how to do this for behavior, or I don't know how to do this for what this is expecting in the curriculum. There are so many changes that go through from the DOE down to the districts, and how we're doing things and how we're improving our education for the educators in particular. I think it's really important to know that having someone to guide you through it, just like a trainer in business, just like your professor in a college classroom, you need to have somebody who is there to be able to help you, especially to reflect on what you've been doing. Just an evaluation from your principal or your administrator is not enough. It doesn't come sometimes in time to be able to change how an educator would react in a situation if the evaluation is like in November, right? We don't know if something happens in September or October. That person needs to have somebody to go to be able to talk it out, to reflect on it, and figure out how to be a better educator, or that what they did was great and let's move on.
Thank you. Any further questions from the committee? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I have no further pink cards on this. I'm going to close this hearing on 218. And with that, we are going to go into caucuses, and we'll be caucusing for a brief time here. We do caucus in this room, so folks, that means everybody has to relocate to the hallway or elsewhere. I don't know. We have.
Nice to see you. No. It's awesome. I'm glad we had a crowd today. I hope you all come back. We're going to be acting on that bill in a little bit. Yeah, thank you.
Superintendent's doing, it's teachers, yes, but every position.
I know, yeah, I know. Otherwise, it's like a swim. Good to see you.
We're going to be caucusing for about 15 minutes.
Maybe when we accept. Is this, how's this going to be tied to the Title II? Okay. Because I heard her say Title II is going to.
Basically how it would work with the supplement versus the plan.
Uh-huh.
Manchester gets $1.3 million.
Holy cow.
So with the $1.3 million, they would have to completely expend their anything-
allocation first.
No, the state funds would have to be completely spent first before the Title II funds go. So they would have to completely spend those funds before they could touch their Title II funds.
Okay.
Which for a district like that,
Can you stage it for? I don't know how fast it's going to be because, I mean, I'm telling you.
That whole time. And then
think everybody's here now.
Chair.
Yes.
We're not sure that her voice is going to be nearly as loud as his.
Well, that might be a blessing. Okay, we have several bills here on the docket for today. We're going to go ahead with our executive session. 266, as I mentioned prior to, this is a bill that came in dealing with improvement in our assessment program. And it's a bill that's just totally rewriting 193E, 2, 3, the whole 9 yards. It's dealing with adequacy, and we're working with DOE on it. It's not going to be exec today. Much more work has to be done on this particular bill. We've had, I don't know how many work sessions, which have been full-day work sessions on this bill. And it's like 40 pages in length. And so with that, we're going to jump over 266 and not have, well, I'm going to open it up and then we'll recess this to another time because there's several things I want to share right now. So we're going to open up SB 266 relative to the statewide education improvement and assessment program. So what I have here, I spent the weekend trying to filter through some of the discussion we'd had. Representative Cascadin, it was not easy. I'm going to pass one of these out to everybody here. I also, of course, talked with Caitlin over at DOE and Dr. Green. And there's the reason why this bill was put forward is that we are putting forward in fall the ESSA grant application to the federal government. And there's some things within these chapters of law which need to be changed, tweaked, in order to facilitate the application which will be forwarded. However, in doing so, 266 changed a whole lot. The delivery of an adequate education, the criteria, etc. And we're not prepared to do that. And until we really have a understanding what we're clearly doing with this section of law. So I'm handing this out. I'm not going to go through it, but you can see some areas which are underlined. I only went through about page 30 of it and then gave up. And I want to hand it out to you so that you can look at it as well. We're going to have another work session on this. One of the things we can do with this bill, we can retain it and work on it, or we can modify part of it to support what we need to do with our federal grant. And then deal with a new bill coming in if we're going to have to do that in November. So look this over if you would. See what you think. We will set up in the calendar another work session for 266. So I'm going to recess this to a time to be announced. Yes, Representative Cascadin.
Just a question. My concern was the fact that both the IBAS and the PBAS were required now. So I agree with you that I would want more clarification on that piece because at one point it was they had a choice of either one or the other.
Yeah.
And then when PACE was canceled, now we've got to do both. The performance is a lot of work in prepping.
That's right. And those two components you just mentioned aren't in this. That's where I stopped.
It's complicated. Thanks.
It gets
I agree
very
with you.
complicated. Yes.
Thank you. I just want to ask for clarification. So are the underlined parts reflective of the changes the committee was discussing as we did the
And
work
current
sessions?
law.
Say again, please.
And current law.
Thank you.
There are a number of sections which were just like all the indicators for an adequate delivery of an adequate education were left out of 266. And that's a lot of legislation. So that would be in the subsequent pages. We got a side-by-side from Jennifer Four with that all noted. That information she had there has not yet been placed into this. So it's a huge bill. You know how we've addressed adequacy in prior years, and we've looked at several components like the criteria, the content of an adequate education. That took an act of Congress to get the bill out of here. And so changing the whole adequacy law is huge. And right at this time, I don't think we're ready to do it. That's my position. So we'll have a work session on that. We'll recess till a time to be determined. The next bill which we have for today is 213, relative to education institution policies on social media. We had a subcommittee on that, and there's not a clear recommendation that came out of the subcommittee. So without that recommendation, I'm not prepared to take any action on this until we can have a committee of the whole and work on this bill and try to come out with a recommendation that's going to be something that we can move or at least discuss here. I'm seeing some separate amendments coming out right now. There's a Waters amendment, there's a McDonald amendment, there's a Belcher amendment. And one of those amendments I saw the first time this morning, and I'm not satisfied with that. I want to see all amendments coming out of the subcommittee with everybody having an opportunity to really discuss it and know what they're doing. So again, I will recess this bill until a time to be determined. 218. This is establishing an early educator professional development grant, which we discussed earlier this morning. I am also going to recess this until there's several suggestions for amending language, which I will discuss with the committee. One where Representative Cascade, you were mentioning change and to or at one point. That might be a consideration we want to look at. But without that amendment, if we don't have it in front of us. So I would like to, I'm not saying this bill is not worthy, not at all, but there may be some areas which we have to look at in terms of getting it ready for. So this too will be held next week because this is an early bill. A time to be announced. So that takes us down to 272, establishing a parent's Bill of Rights in Education. We know how this is going to end up, so I've asked that a motion come forward, and Representative Cordiella, I'm looking for a motion from you.
On SB 272, I move ought to pass.
Is there a second? Representative Belcher? So we have a motion made by Representative Cordiello and second by Representative Belcher on SB 272, establishing a parent's Bill of Rights in Education. Representative Cordiello, and we're going to have one person voting for each side on this bill, as we've mentioned. Speaking, yes. Okay, go ahead, yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. One thing that was brought up at the hearing, I remember, was a senator suggested, and I think this is the case, that when parents start asking questions on the issues that are really the primary focus of this bill has been on a small part of it, having to do with gender identity issues. And when parents start asking these questions, they already probably have a feeling, that the suspicion that there's something to ask about. They're just not going to go. It's not calling out a certain group of people, I believe. It is not, I believe, outing a particular group of people. All this bill asks for is truthful answers to parents' questions. And I believe that facilitates a partnership, or in an earlier hearing, if you were here, there was Megan Tuttle on a different bill, brought up a phrase I've heard before, the three-legged stool, parents, teachers, students. I believe that this bill supports that idea. It forms a partnership based on truth. What this bill prohibits is something that has been part of law since the very beginning of us having laws. You shall not lie. It also supports something else that is a pillar of our society, which is parental rights, parental authority over their children. One of the counter arguments that came up again and again, and there was, as we all know on this committee, a waterfall, an avalanche, whatever metaphor you wanted to use. The number of emails we got on this was overwhelming. And one of the issues that was brought up was the potential for parental abuse. And that could happen, yes, but there are already laws that would make an exception for withholding this information. So there's an exception. But another point I want to bring out is that something that I don't think was maybe mentioned. Let's realize that also there can be abuse by school personnel. And I could cite a number of articles I read lately, things that were sent in those emails, but I want to keep this as brief as possible. I may go over my usual rule of talking for 3 minutes because this is a very important bill and very complex. Actually, it's not complex. As I said, it is you shall not lie. So we have to recognize also that school personnel abuse can be a potential issue too. As I said, this bill upholds parental authority. There's been a century, I won't go into detail here, Supreme Court precedents for over a century have upheld parental rights. Meyer versus Nebraska, Pierce versus Society of Sisters, Wisconsin versus Yoder. I could go on and on, okay? I've done a lot of research here. And there's a reason that the parental authority is upheld time and time again. It's a pillar of our society. I ran for this office because I used to be a teacher and I taught about dystopian literature. And I started to see that some of it was starting to come true a bit. And one of the novels is Brave New Worlds that I taught. And it is a novel about a society in which there are no parents. And it is a society that is based on lies. And I fear that, not to be dramatic, this is kind of a step in that direction. Some of the testimony that was particularly moving for me, and I was the clerk, so I was like, along with Representative Dry, who took over, because it was a lot of writing. And I found some of the most dramatic testimony to be from people who used to live in communist countries, and in those countries, parental rights are not encouraged, or they're outlawed pretty much, and parental rights and these societies are also based on withholding truth. So just, I know I'm talking more than I usually would, but this is very important. As a teacher, I used to really go to the text. What is this bill calling for? I think it's a list of rights. It kind of brings all together the different laws from all over our statutes for parents. But the ones that are contentious are, let's see, it's towards the end. The ones, this is the part that has been very contentious. So parents have the right to inquire of the school or school personnel and to be truthfully and completely informed about 3 different issues regarding gender identity. This phrase is repeated 3 times, so I'm going to repeat it again. The right to inquire, not the right of school officials to out students. This is the right of the parent to ask a question. The right to inquire of the school or school personnel and be truthfully and completely informed. 3 times that's repeated. Infringement of the rights in this bill, if you go a little earlier, there's a similar repetition. Infringement for the purposes of this chapter shall include the knowing withholding of truthful information. That's one phrase. And then the next line, the knowing provision of misleading or intentionally inaccurate information. And then the line right after that is the denial of the existence of information. What do all these phrases have in common? It's lying. So this bill ought to pass, and it must pass, because our society is based on these pillars of parental authority and truth. Without them, not only will the 3-legged stool collapse, but so will our society. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Tanner.
Thank you. There's no heavier burden than a great potential here. SB 272, we know, is part of a national political movement to disrupt, dismantle, and defame teachers in our public schools. Parents are being led into believing that they are being lied to, denied rights, and mistreated by teachers in our schools. Parents already have and will continue, and we all respect their rights to direct the care and the education of their minor children. And there's a technical advisory document available on the New Hampshire Department of Education website speaking to student privacy and student transparency laws that outlines the roughly 20 to 30 rights parents currently have concerning privacy and school transparency. Parents are also protected by federal FERPA laws, as well as these state laws, and have many educational opportunities available to them. Schools and teachers accept their responsibilities to educate students, to help them grow and learn, to keep them as safe as possible, to nourish self-esteem, to challenge all students to be better than they think they can be, and to assist them in becoming good citizens. Helping a student might mean providing snacks or tissue to wipe a tear, or attending with a Band-Aid to a bump or a bruise, offering consolation for the loss of a pet or a loved one, or to literally put themselves in the line of fire to save their students' lives, which we see on a daily basis. Teachers and counselors provide a trusted adult to both parents and students, allowing them to vent, to grieve, to celebrate successes, to find resources for problem solving, to hear words of encouragement, and to tell their students that they're proud of them. SB 272 is a bill that cynically sows distrust and division, and as a consequence, hurts children, especially children who are LGBTQ, non-binary, or transgender, or their families. It is a bill that forces schools that could be the safe place for vulnerable kids into a perilous place by requiring schools to notify parents of their child's participation in clubs, activities, or organizations. This means groups like Gay Straight Alliance or Alateen, in which anonymity is important for their participation, and without that, those groups cannot function. SB 272 also requires teachers and schools to report students who request to be known by a nickname or want to be addressed by a transgender name or pronoun. At times, this rush to inform will deny the time for thoughtfulness and care that is sometimes needed for a teen and their family to approach this sensitive issue. Many of us are facing challenging and thought-provoking issues as part of our daily lives. Schools, teachers, and families need to support each other and work together as they help children navigate the complexities of growing up. Legislators should use child welfare and the best interests of the child as the focus of their efforts. But SB 272 does not support children and is not in the best interest of children. Rather, this ultra-conservative national agenda item is intended to incite fear, stoke the fires of division among us, and create an adversarial battle between our public schools, teachers, and families. This is not the New Hampshire way, and we should not become part of an attempt to marginalize vulnerable children who are already struggling. I oppose this bill and oppose the fact that it singles out again, vulnerable, transgender, LGBTQ children. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we've heard it from both positions now, so we're ready to go ahead, and the motion on the floor is OTP. That motion was made by Representative Cordial and second by Representative Belcher. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Representative Ford,
Yes.
Representative McDonald,
Yes.
Representative Leckus,
Yes.
Representative Belcher,
Yes.
Representative Dry,
Yes.
Representative McDonald,
Yes.
Representative Noble,
Yes.
Representative Peternell,
Yes.
Representative Cortiello, yes. Representative Myler,
No.
Representative Cornell,
No.
Representative Tanner,
No.
Representative Luno,
No.
Representative Ellison,
No.
Representative Murray,
No.
Representative Heath,
No.
Representative Balboni,
No.
Representative Cascadden,
No.
Representative Damon,
No.
Chairman Ladd.
Yes.
10 yeas, 10 nays.
Motion?
Yes, Representative Myler,
I'd like to move to ITL 272. Thank you.
and second by Representative Tanner.
Yes, I'd like to second that. Thank
Okay, we have a motion on the table, ITL 272, made by Representative Myler and second by Representative Tanner. Discussion from the maker of the motion? You're welcome. Second? Okay, we have a motion on the table. Madam Clerk, would you please call the rolls?
Representative Ford,
No.
Representative McDonald,
No.
Representative Leckus,
No.
Representative Belcher,
No.
Representative Dry,
No.
Representative McDonald,
No.
Representative Noble,
No.
Representative Peternell,
No.
Representative Cortiello, no. Representative Myler,
Yes.
Representative Cornell,
Yes.
Representative Tanner,
Yes.
Representative Luno,
Yes.
Representative Ellison,
Yes.
Representative Murray,
Yes.
Representative Heath,
Yes.
Representative Balboni,
Yes.
Representative Cascadden,
Yes.
Representative Damon,
Yes.
Chairman Ladd.
No.
10 yeas, 10 nays.
Okay, so it'll go on the floor as with no recommendation, and the ought to pass motion will be brought up first. Who's going to write the minority report? Representative Myler? Okay, and the ITL report. Thank you. Okay, with that, we've concluded our action today on SB 272, and that does conclude our meeting this morning with House Education. Thank you very much. We're done.
Representative Ladd,
Yes.
before we leave, I'd like to thank the teachers in the audience who have taken part of their holiday this week to come in and have a chance. We don't usually have a chance to see practicing teachers in the audience for the Education Committee. So on behalf of the committee, I'd like to thank you for being here and being present. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, everybody enjoy the sun while it's out. Have a good day. No, I want to contact the people over at DOE